Welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations, a series of short and shareable conversation starters for those of us who have or love and support people with a complicated and beautiful brain. Here's your host, Angela Geddes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Kitchen Table Conversations. If you've been listening regularly, you'll notice that I've been not producing as many of these this year so far, and that's just for a variety of different reasons, but glad you're here, glad that you've decided to share some space with us, and hope that you bring this conversation back home. Today, we're going to chat about something that hits really close to my heart and is really foundationally why I do the work that I do. We support children, we support youth and families, we work alongside many of our military veterans and members of our Ontario Provincial Police. We work with partner agencies that support victims of crime. We work with probation services and parole services to provide supports and assessment for people involved with the justice system, and we do so for many agencies that are involved with child protection as well. And we support everyday community members who are experiencing or navigating complex mental health and learning challenges, or maybe some situational stressors in life where they would benefit from a helper. And that's what we are. We're helpers. And I do believe a couple of things. One of them is that it takes a community to raise a child, and there's a little child in all of us. And I do believe that we all need helpers from time to time. So I'm quite honored to do this work. And across all of these spaces, I keep seeing the same thing. I see good people doing the best they can, who really want good things for themselves and for the people that are close to them. But in many cases, and more than we expect to see, people are struggling within systems that were never designed for their brains. So I want to start with a simple but important shift. What if the problem isn't the person, but it's the approach? Because typical mental health strategies, while helpful for many, do not help for everyone. But they will help if you're talking about typical mental health conditions. But when they don't work, we often assume that this is not anything wrong with our approach. It's not anything wrong with our assessment. Instead, we see a lack of motivation, we see resistance to treatment, or we see consistent poor choices. But what if we're missing something? In my work, I often say, if the usual strategies were going to work, if the typical strategies were going to work, they would have worked by now. So instead of pushing harder or expecting more from the individual that's in front of us, maybe we need to dig a little deeper. Many of the individuals I support have what I call a complicated and beautiful brain. And many times they come to me with an existing diagnosis of anxiety or ADHD or depressive symptoms, that kind of thing. But sometimes, we know that there might have been some other complexities that we need to be considered, like prenatal substance exposure or FASD, autism, learning difficulties, and certainly some trauma and attachment. And often it's not just one thing. It is layered, it is overlapping, it is complex, it is puzzling, and it's often misunderstood. And here is the reality that we cannot ignore, and you may have heard this before, but it's worth saying again. FASD alone affects at least 1 in 25 Canadians, possibly more. But fewer than 1% of those who should be diagnosed are ever assessed or will likely to be assessed in the next, at least not in the near future, right? So that means the vast majority of individuals are moving through schools, mental health systems, justice systems, and healthcare without being properly recognized and supported. And when we don't recognize it, we misinterpret it. We see defiance, laziness, poor decision making, instead of understanding some of these real, brain-based differences. And I want to pause here because this part really, really matters. These are not just statistics that I'm sharing with you. These are real people. People who have said things like, This is torture. I shouldn't be here. And one woman said, I think medical assistance in dying should be an option for me. I do not want to be here. People keep telling me that I need to be here and that there's a purpose, but I don't think there is a purpose for all of us. This is the level of distress that we're seeing. And this is not because people haven't tried, not because people aren't resilient, and not because people don't want help, but because the help so far, and at least not on a more general, broad basis, the help is not a good fit. And we can't do this alone as helpers either. One social worker can't do it. One therapist can't do it. One caregiver can't do it. This does take a community. And this is where we really need to be honest. It's not a failure of the individuals. This is a failure of systems to recognize and support neurodevelopmental differences. Right now, we rely very heavily on diagnosis, and diagnosis absolutely matters. It does provide clarity. It does open some doors. It does help families understand. It does give individuals a sense of, this is why I'm struggling with this. This makes sense now. This is how my brain works. It really does help the individual to be able to feel some additional self-compassion and compassion for people around them who, now they recognize that some of their symptoms have been pretty tricky over the years, and maybe they've lacked perspective taking, and they've felt like their parents were being harder on them than they actually were, because now they have this clarity around how their brain works. But here's the problem. Given the statistics, given the lack of access to diagnostic services in Ontario and globally, quite frankly, we cannot wait for diagnosis to start helping people because wait lists are long, access is uneven, and demand is growing faster than capacity. And we also have to understand that sometimes these clinics require prenatal alcohol exposure to be confirmed, which of course, we need that if we're looking specifically for an FASD diagnosis. But my argument has always been that there are going to be times where this is not, we're not going to know this for certain. I've worked with many families who their children come from other countries where there's no prenatal health documentation at all, but we have high inclination and we know the area and we have heard about, intergenerational challenges with mental health and substance use and addictions within the biological family. We know that, but we don't have anything documenting specifics around alcohol use. So then that means they're not welcomed into some of these clinics, but that doesn't mean that their needs aren't really high and intense. So what do we need to do? I have been saying for many, many years that we need a two-pronged approach. Yes, we do need to continue building diagnostic capacity. And at the same time, we build capacity across all systems. And this means training people across education, mental health, healthcare, justice, child welfare, to be better positioned to recognize some of these patterns, to screen for prenatal health and exposures, to understand brain-based differences, and to adjust support immediately and not wait for a clear diagnosis. Because here's the truth. There are too many people affected for clinic-based models alone to keep up. And when we shift our approach, we can see different outcomes. We can see fewer crises. We can see less system involvement. We can see more connection. And we can see more safety and dignity. And this is also about prevention. And the prevention has to be compassionate because nobody drinks during their pregnancy intending to cause harm. So instead of blame, we need to focus on education, support, safe housing, trauma-informed care, and even preconception health for both parents. This is imperative. I just came from a Stag and Doe this weekend where I put in as one of the raffle prizes a pregnancy preparation and planning kit. And that includes a menu or a recipe book for nutritious meals that will give you the vitamins and nutrients that puts the pregnancy in the best possible position for the healthiest of babies. It also includes a book that focuses on what to expect while you're trying to conceive. And within that book, I created an insert for page 18 that talks specifically around prenatal health and how to prepare for both mums and dads, and to do what we can to make sure that we plan a pregnancy. And I challenged a little bit of the permissive language around the trying to conceive stage. The author indicated that there were no hard and fast rules, which I guess that's not inaccurate, but there is hard and fast evidence that at the time of conception, the substance use and alcohol use matters in terms of the overall outcomes for that baby. So that, I believe, it's our responsibility to make sure that people have the right information needed to make informed decisions, right? So if we think that there's no risk in those early weeks of pregnancy, then we're not going to take the precautions that we need. But there is no safe time, there is no safe amount, and there is no safe type of alcohol to consume. And even at during the preconception stages and at the time of conception, it matters. And from a systems perspective, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. Research shows that for every dollar invested in prevention, there can be up to $9 in return in terms of long-term system savings. Check out FASD Australia's website for more details on this. I'll put a link on my website as well, because this is really important information to share. So this is my call to action for all of us, not just policymakers. If you're a professional, please stay curious, look beyond behavior, adjust your approach, and consider attending some of the training that I offer. Check out my website. I've got a new session coming up in May, specifically to increase our ability as social workers and allied health professionals to screen, identify, assess, and support individuals and family members who are impacted by prenatal alcohol exposure. So we as frontline providers can be very impactful in terms of functional assessments, and people who participate in this training are going to be better positioned to do that and to enhance their current practice. If you are a caregiver, you are not the problem. Your child is not the problem. We just need better fitting support and not your typical parenting approaches. So again, there's a book that I've written that could be helpful in that regard. There's also a couple of books that have been written for professionals and educators. So check out my website for more of those as well. And if you're someone who sees yourself in this conversation, you're not alone either. And this is not about something being broken or wrong with you. It's about the need to understand, how do you function? What are your strengths? What are really, really hard for you? And if they are legitimately hard for you, then it's okay to get some help. So I've written another book that helps to address that as well, which is called Not Your Typical Growing Up and Adulting Guide. And there's a corresponding workbook that goes along with that. And again, this is written for individuals who are walking this every day. And so collectively, we need to advocate for some of this cross-sector training. We need to be better positioned for earlier screening, coordinated systems, and supports that focus on safety, dignity, and again, that real life functioning. What does this look like at home? How are the parents dealing with this? What does this look like in the classroom? And let's tease out some of the complex symptoms, because no kid comes out of a book. Like, let's use case examples and help to illustrate what is happening in the days and the lives of individuals who've been affected by some of these prenatal exposures. Because every time we talk about that, every time we talk about FASD, every time we increase understanding, and we do contribute to prevention. And I truly believe this: when we know better, we can do better. And right now, we do know enough to act. So thanks so much for sitting in with me at this kitchen table. And if it resonated with you, please share it. Start the conversation, because change doesn't happen in systems alone. And do what you can to investigate in your area what's going on around FASD, what kinds of prevention initiatives are taking place. Where do we go for supports? Do you know your FASD worker? Do you know anybody in your family that might be struggling, or your community or your neighborhood who might be struggling with some complex behaviors that, everybody's chalking up to poor parenting or poor decision making? And maybe there's a role for you to play in this collaborative effort. And support your local politicians. Talk to them if you can. I know that our Canadian FASD Research Network is facilitating or, really advocating for a national strategy. And the folks that I work with on a regular basis, FASD Ontario Network of Expertise, is also advocating for a national strategy so that there's some targeted investment in prevention, in assessment, in supports, and in family caregiver supports, and in further research. All of it's really, really important. I forgot to mention that along with the training for social workers and allied health professionals, I'm also participating in a couple of workshops at a conference in Seattle in late April. The details are on my website around that too, but I'm really honored to be presenting on the importance of social workers and allied health professionals in doing functional assessments, and how that can really put people on the right path to helpful and relevant support. So that's happening between April 18th and 22nd, I believe, or 21st. I think I'm coming home on the 22nd. And then there's also going to be some training on April 28th in Glencoe, offered through Quad Counties, where we were opening it up to service providers in the area to learn more about what complicated and beautiful brains look like across the lifespan, and how this is often linked to prenatal health, including prenatal alcohol and substance exposures. I'm also going to be doing a webinar for Brock University, the Teachers College there, on I believe it's March 31st, and I'm in Fanshawe College on March 27th and March 30th, presenting with the Child and Youth Worker first and second year program. So really, really excited about that as well. So check out my website for more resources, more information, more training opportunities if this interests you. And again, change doesn't just happen within systems. We all have a role to play to support healthy pregnancies, healthy people, healthy families, and healthy communities. So thanks so much.